Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Mike Beer. It is a huge Saturday afternoon of racing at Kentucky Downs. The feature race is race number 12. It's the Grade 2 Kentucky Turf Cup. Only $1.7 million is the purse for this race, going a mile and a half on the grass. Let's take a peek at this field. And not surprisingly, if you put out the money, they're going to come from all over the place. And we have an overflow field, 12 in the body of the race, 13 through 16. The also eligible Therapist, the winner of the United Nations last time out at a big price, is our tepid morning line favorite at 7-2.
Yeah, got a big price on him when he won the UN in his most recent start. Dan, listen, it's a typical maker stuff with this horse who never really seemed like he wanted to go that far earlier in his career. 8 years old now, distance is no issue, coming off a Grade 1 win.
Let's see where he's going to be on our Timeform US pace projector for this marathon event. No surprise that the 5 Get Smokin' is expected to go to the front. That is his game. The question for Get Smokin' is how far really does he want to go? After Get Smokin', it sort of gets interesting. Santin's tactical speed plays well, but he's another horse that's a bit of an unknown at this extra distance.
Distance is, he's a quality racehorse for sure, Santin, but distance is a little bit of a question for him. I expect him to be forward. Get Smokin' kind of feels like he has one way to go in this race. We'll see how far back Therapist does. I didn't really view him as some kind of deep closer in this race, Dan. Not that he's going to be up close, but he can get a trip up close, more close than that.
A horse that has no problems with the mile and a half is the number 1, Foreign Relations. And maybe he'll get a little bit closer to the pace with the addition of blinkers. He did win the Grade 3 Louisville going a mile and a half at Churchill Downs 3 starts back. 2 subsequent stakes tries, finished behind Therapist both times. Did you see an excuse in the UN?
I didn't. I didn't see an excuse for him at either of his 2 most recent starts. That being said, they went a mile and a half with him, back in May. He looked pretty good to me winning that Louisville, Dan. Therapist was also in that race. Therapist got a terrible trip in that Louisville, and this horse got a really good one. But I don't know, man. This horse, he ran really well at a mile. It feels like the added distance helps him. I'm not sure how good he is.
The number 2 is Red Knight, and he's the defending champion in this race. And it's nice to know you have a horse with winning experience at Kentucky Downs. That's often a very big angle. Another piece of good news for Red Knight fans: he's a very dependable and good horse who's already won a Grade 1 stakes race in New York this year. He was 3rd last time out in the UN. The issue with Red Knight is, can he get a trip? He likes to run from the back of the pack. Sometimes he's a difficult horse to ride. At least with this spacious configuration at Kentucky Downs, he should get somewhere to run.
Yeah, that's a clear advantage for this horse. He clearly likes running here, Dan. As you mentioned, he won this race last year, ran really well. It was a close finish that day, but to me, he was clearly best in that spot. He also ran in this race, I think, back in 2020, and he ran well that day, 2nd in this race. So he really likes it here. The distance is good for him. He does need a little bit of pace to close it. He doesn't have a lot of speed. He's going to sit back. He's going to try to make one run, but he's going to show up. He shows up every single time.
The 3, Verstappen's a little bit underrated. This horse is already a graded stakes winner at a mile and a half this year. He won the Elkhorn during the Keeneland Spring Meet, exiting a good effort in the Grade 2 Bowling Green at Saratoga, where he got wired by Saratoga-loving Channel Maker. Verstappen tries really hard. I thought all in all the trip worked out for him. He's just going to get beat by a class master that found his best form.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see what happens with this horse in this race. I actually, Dan, you mentioned you think he's underrated. I think he's overrated, but, I guess we'll see about that. He did win a Grade 2 earlier this year going this distance, and he ran fine that day. I don't like his 2 starts after that. He, to me, got a perfect trip in the Bowling Green last time and was only 2nd best in there. And it's just worth pointing out in the Bowling Green. The favorite lost his rider around the final turn. He eliminated the 2nd and the 3rd choices in that race. So who knows what that race is going to look like at the finish. If that didn't happen, I suspect Verstappen wouldn't have been 2nd.
Santin, the number 4, won a couple of Grade 1 stakes races at Churchill Downs in 2022. Brendan Walsh is one of my favorite trainers. He's very reliable. It's just sort of odd how Santin's been campaigned this year. I understand maybe you start him out on synthetic as a starting off point, but then after he only ran okay at Churchill in the Turf Classic, they tried dirt a couple of times. At least he seemingly got back into form last time out in the Arlington Million, close to a vast pace and then run down by a quality closer. Maybe he's rounding himself back into shape. I don't know about the mile and a half.
That's a fair way to look at him, is that maybe he is getting back to his good form right now. And he did run really well in the Arlington Million last time. I think he'll get the right trip in this race. I think he'll be right up close, Dan. Like you, I have concerns about how far he wants to go. I have no concerns about whether he classes up with this field, because he does.
Get Smoking is the speed of the race. Timeform US pointed that out. He was on the lead last time out at Ellis Park. He was beaten by me and Mr. C. He only got beat a length, but that's kind of Get Smoking's races. He goes to the front. He runs well. The wins are few and far between.
Yeah, and the distance is a real question for this horse, too. I mean, his overall form is actually really solid. He won 1.25 miles last time. That was a stretch out for him. I don't know about you, Dan. I mean, it's not like they were walking on the lead, but I didn't think this horse had some kind of big excuse at that race. He was holding the lead down past mid-stretch, out-finished not only by the winner who came from out of it, but by Cellist, who sat right up on the pace with this horse, and just seemed like he stayed out the trip better. Now he's got to go 1.5 miles this time. I don't know. I'm really concerned about it.
Me and Mr. C is stepping up into graded stakes competition, but the number 6 certainly deserves an opportunity at this level. He's won his last 3 starts. He beat 4 of these rivals in his most recent race, the Preview at Ellis Park, a race where the 3rd place finisher came back to run second here at Kentucky Downs with a 94 buyer. So he's lurking under the radar for the great Michael Maker at a price.
Yeah, this is one of the horses that when Maker took over, he didn't stretch him out right away. He sort of kept him at shorter distances for a really long time. They stretched him out to the 1.25 miles last time. And he did run well. As you pointed out, his recent form is really good. He got a great trip in that race last time, though, Dad. I mean, I don't want to take too much away from him. He was a good price, and he did come running at the end. But, man, that trip really worked out.
Arad Ortiz Jr. is named to ride the number 7, Kito Dan, who pulled off a huge upset in last year's Grade 3 Dueling Grounds Derby at Kentucky Downs, another horse for course. He's only had 2 races this year. They haven't been great, but again, he's making his 3rd start of the form cycle. Perhaps he's racing himself back into shape. They're wheeling him back on short notice, and it's a good sign that Arad's named.
Yeah, that is a good sign. We'll see how much money it pulls his way. To me, this horse is a pretty tough call in here, Dan. He didn't run well off the layoff, but that was a pretty long layoff 2 starts back. He had a little bit of a trip last time, trying to rally through some traffic in the stretch. There was pace in front of him, however. I don't know. I still didn't think he ran that great, but maybe he'll run his best race now with Irad taking over, stretching out.
Never Explained, the number 8 goes out for Shug McGahee. I thought he ran okay. 3 starts back at Monmouth at a shorter distance in graded stakes action, where he had to kind of make a wide early bid into contention, and he tried hard. He ended up finishing second. Last time out in the Arlington Million, I guess he got into a little bit of traffic. Did you think it hurt him?
It might have. I think it's a pretty tough call. I sort of understand what his rider was doing there. It seemed like he didn't want to go for the early run around the final turn. So he just sort of stayed in behind horses, and that allowed Set Piece and the 3rd place finisher to both get the jump on this horse. They both circled up around him, and he had to try to then run him down through the stretch. He still almost got second. I mean, he ran pretty well last time, I thought. He also ran pretty well in the Bowling Green 2 starts back. If he settles, he's got to settle. He gets pretty headstrong in some of his races. If he settles and he can get this distance, he's a dangerous horse.
Nautilus is the number 9. He's a Group 1 winner over turf in his native Brazil. His 1 start in the States last year in way too tough in the Breeders' Cup turf, especially considering the layoff. He did get back to the winner's circle last time out, but it was an off-turf race at Ellis Park going a mile. It's a completely different story here.
Yeah, I don't really know how well he fits in this race. If nothing else, I mean, I guess at a big price, you could just sort of look at him as a wild card in here, getting back to turf in a more logical spot for him over a distance that probably isn't that much of an issue. I mean, that's a fair way to look at him, Dan. I didn't like him in this race, but I wouldn't argue with anybody who just felt like they wanted to take a shot.
I've always been a big fan of the number 10, Another Mystery. He just missed when 3rd in last year's Kentucky Turf Cup. He hasn't been seen since May, where he ran in the Louisville, and he ran below par. So maybe he was just crying out for a little bit of a break. I have a lot of respect for his trainer, Chris Block. To me, he's the kind of horse that maybe making a case for him on the win end is a little bit hard, but I can see him springing into the exotics at a big price.
I looked at him that way, too. He's not the kind of horse I think you want to totally dismiss in here at a big price. I mean, his most recent start, I haven't seen him since May, but that most recent start, it may not look that great on paper, but man, that was just a very deliberate pace in there. They were going really slow in front of him. He's last as that field comes around the final turn. To me, he never really had a fair shot the last time we saw him.
Now, we've talked about it for years now on our stakes previews and race of the days here on DRF video, is that Michael Maker takes horses, stretches them out in distance, and they just become different animals. He has a knack for seeing something in a horse. We followed Therapist's career for a long time in New York. We thought he'd have trouble winning a race at 1 1/16, 1 1/8. Maker got him. He stretched him out. All of a sudden, he's a new animal. He wins this race, the UN, last time out. The trip worked out. Javier took him off the rail early, got him into the outside and in the clear. He makes this 4-wide move into the stretch, and he wins pretty easily considering the price. He was 12-1. I'm not sure this was a stellar edition of the UN. As a matter of fact, I think it was likely a subpar edition, but still he wins very easily, and he's obviously in good form.
Yeah, agreed. He was much the best in this race. He got a good trip in there, but it's not like Red Knight, who finished third, who was right behind him for most of the trip. I mean, Red Knight just basically followed this horse around the track. Therapist outkicked him and won very convincingly, I thought. His recent form is really, really good, Dan. Maker has stretched him out. It has worked. I think if he runs as well in this spot as he did last time in the UN, he's going to be real tough.
Final horse in the body of the race is the 12. That's Spooky Channel, and he's done very good work at 1.5 miles. You can even make the argument it's his favorite distance. He was only beaten a length in the Connolly 4 starts back. He then won the Muniz, turning back to 1 1/8. Last time out was his first start off of a layoff. Remember, that was the prep race for this at Ellis Park. It's at a much shorter distance. Give me a little bit of an excuse for that race.
I don't know if he has an excuse, Dan. It almost looked like a prep race, though, in that race. I mean, his rider just took a hold of this horse and dragged him back to last early in that spot. He just trailed all the way up the backstretch, all the way around the final turn. He was still last when that field came to the 8th pole. And then he, made a little bit of a run, but there was nothing he could really do in that race. I think they might have been prepping him there, Dan. They're going to stretch him out a little bit further here. As you've already mentioned, he can get this far very easily. And it's not like his last couple of starts where they just take him back to last. It's not like he has to be ridden that way. This is not a horse who's been a one-run closer throughout his career. I think he's going to run a lot better in this spot.
Closing in on millionaire status is the 12 Spooky Channel, 13 through 16 entered on the also eligible list. I guess of those horses, I'd look at highest honors, the 15, who's Ortiz's first call, getting blinkers for the first time for Chad Brown. Although I have to admit, I'm starting to get tired of his act a little bit, Mike.
Yeah, I'm tired of that horse too. I don't care if he gets in this race or not. There's no way I'd have any money on him. I guess if I had to take one of the A's, I'd throw Cellist in there because he's a little bit underrated and he can get this far.
Let's take a look at our top picks for the Grade 2 Kentucky Turf Cup. You're going with Spooky Channel. You made a compelling argument. I have a feeling like you that the last race was merely a prep. And if you just go back throughout his form, when you're playing this race with DRF bets, you get free formulator past performances, make it lifetime, go all the way back. He has lots of races, especially at this distance, that make him a threat, and he's a giant price on the tote.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to have to show up with one of his really good races in here. But if he does, he can easily go with these horses. He's a great price.
Therapist is not going to be the price he was last time out in the United Nations, and that's a bit disappointing. But just Maker has him in very good form right now. How is he going to handle the Kentucky Downs configuration? That is a big question. I want to use foreign relations a little bit. I think he's so lightly raced. We've yet to see his best. And 3 back, he put it all together in the Louisville. Maybe he can do it again at a price. 12-11-8-2 for Mike. 11-1-4-2 for me. Wide open. Grade 2. Kentucky Turf Cup. Big card at the Downs on Saturday. Good luck.